Tonight, a notorious murder back in the national spotlight.
Just this week, a wildly controversial parole decision. Is a convicted killer now walking free? An all-new 2020 starts right now.
Pound for pound, one of the greatest true crime stories of all time.
This would turn out to be a notorious, surreal case.
A woman brutally murdered in cold blood.
Investigators at the time believed that Sherri Rasmussen was the victim of a burglary that had turned into her own murder.
As I walked in, there was blood.
She was literally clawing at the front door, trying to get out.
People were on edge during that era. And add to that, we were the serial killer capital of the world.
It's like being hit by a train, just like being hit by a train. I don't usually talk about that day or that time.
How soon was it after the murder that your father and your mother started to think that maybe this wasn't a robbery?
I assumed it was going to be burglars, male burglars.
And there was another piece of evidence that caught the attention of investigators. A bite mark on Sherri's forearm.
I suspect that the LAPD could never have fathomed.
If you walk down Hollywood Boulevard, you can't help but notice the stars on the sidewalk, the glitter in the pavement, and you think to yourself, wow, this is Tinseltown. But it doesn't take long until you realize that there are deep cracks in that pavement, exposing a criminal element you could never have anticipated. And the case of Sherri Rasmussen was a rude awakening for anyone living in La La Land.
President Reagan in Los Angeles.
Today, the torch entered the City of Angels
for AIDS Walkathon in Hollywood.
It was 1986. A beautiful young nurse, only 3 months into her marriage, is brutally murdered in her own townhome.
As a television journalist, I've been reporting on true crime stories for decades on numerous outlets. And you think you're never going to be shocked anymore ever again? Well, this proved all that very wrong.
It was a huge story. It had all the elements, sex and betrayal and lies. It just gripped the nation.
It's definitely, pound for pound, one of the greatest true crime stories of all time.
Everything we always heard or was told about Aunt Sherri was about what a great person she was.
Tell me about your sister.
She was the middle sister, and she was a clown. If everything got too serious, she would make everybody laugh.
She had a very unique little giggle.
Uncle John and Aunt Sherri are spending Christmas with Rachel on her first Christmas.
Sherri was all about family. Sherri was our glue. She kept us all together.
From a young age, Sherri, the middle child with that infectious giggle, seemed mature beyond her years, according to her sisters, Connie and Teresa. She leapfrogged from the 8th grade into high school, and Sherri graduated early at the age of just 16 and enrolled in nursing school.
She had certainly an interest in caring for other people.
By the time she was 21, Sherri was fearless and determined, and she moved from her hometown of Tucson, Arizona to Los Angeles.
When she passed away, she was the director of critical care at the Glendale Adventist Hospital.
When I think of Sherri, I think of her kindness and her generosity.
Sherri's father, Nels, who was a dentist, had encouraged her to enroll in medical school to become a doctor, but she had other plans in mind.
Sherri always wanted to have a family and a husband and children.
In the spring of 1984, Sherri met a young engineer named John Rutten.
John Rutten was a tall, handsome, bright, athletic young man from San Diego, California.
Sherri was so tall, she often had difficulty finding guys who weren't intimidated by someone with her stature. And I know that John was just taken with her.
Sherri and John were very happy together. Sherri was always smiling and laughing and happy.
They settled in Sherri's condo in Van Nuys, and in November 1985, the couple got married.
It was a joyous celebration.
You could tell that they were in love.
She was just beginning her life. She'd met the man of her dreams, and she had a great job, and she was doing very well, and it was all coming together. 3 months later, and now it was all gone.
February 24, 1986. John had just returned home from work, and as he's walking up the steps into the townhome, the door is ajar. He walks into the townhome and sees his gorgeous bride dead in a pool of blood on the living room floor. He calls 911.
I was patrolling, and I got a call to Balboa Boulevard.
Veteran LAPD patrol officer Rodney Forrest was one of the first cops to arrive at the scene.
The call was a death investigation. I thought that was particularly interesting. Why a murder in a kind of upscale part of town?
When Forrest and his partner got there, they were met with a grim warning from paramedics.
Somebody said, "You're not going to be prepared for what's in there." And I'm thinking, well, I've seen it all, so let's go see. Oh, wow. Well, this brings back memories. It's kind of an eerie feeling to be here after 30 plus, almost 40 years. As I walked in, I saw Sherri Rasmussen on the ground. She had been covered with a towel, and one of the paramedics raised the towel for me to see her face, and she had considerable trauma to her face, and there was blood. I thought after that, this is actually a murder.
At that point, Officer Forrest called the LAPD's Van Nuys division to notify the homicide unit, which took over the investigation.
It's a horribly violent crime. Bruises all over her body. The struggle ensued for quite some time.
My partner went upstairs, checked the upper floor for any suspects, and there were no suspects still around.
Investigators knew that something catastrophic had happened to Miss Rasmussen.
You think, given the ferocity of that fight, that somebody would have heard something.
You would think. It was a heck of a fight. I mean, Sherri fought for her life, literally.
That night, news of Sherri's murder reached her family in Tucson.
I'll probably never forget it, unfortunately. My dad called me to tell me that Sherri was dead. And I was like, that is, I certainly didn't believe it.
Beyond the pale.
Yeah. I was like, no, what are you talking about? That's not true. And he said, no, it is. And then I started screaming.
In the wake of Sherri's murder, her family struggled to understand what had happened. Could this be the result of the rampant violence that had plagued the city of Los Angeles in recent years?
A grim statistic from Los Angeles.
More murders in 1980 than ever before.
In parts of Los Angeles, there is a dangerous new tension.
Or had it been something far more personal?
This was a cold, calculated murder.
When investigators looked further into the crime scene, they uncovered a major clue that could change the course of the investigation.
This would turn out to be a notorious, surreal case with a twist no Hollywood writer could have come up with.